Yeah, take it out.
It's going to be okay?
Yeah.
Good. This is federal money.
Okay.
No, you want me to back off. I said, look, we'll edit this out. Study this out in summer. It's conclusive. You can hear you can want to. I said, tell Jeff that.
Good morning, everybody. The Committee on Appropriations is called to order. If we can get everyone's attention, both in the audience and up here. I believe we may have a quorum already. Madam Secretary, if you could be so kind enough, please call the roll.
De Leon.
Present.
Conway. Here. Amiano. Here. Bradford. Here. Calderon. Cotto. Davis. Fuentes. Hall. Here. Harkey. Here. Miller. Here. Nielsen. Here. John Perez. Skinner. Solario. Strickland. Torlixon.
Here.
We have a quorum that's been established. Before us, we have 71 bills. We have 14 that are on consent. We have 33 that are candidates for suspense, and we have 24 that are due pass as amended. Before us, we have Mr. Portantino with two measures. That is AB 558 as well as AB 1436. Mr. Portantino, good morning. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm presenting AB 558, a reintroduction of AB 1017, which passed the Assembly, I believe, 78-0 with no votes. It deals with asking law enforcement agencies to report to the Department of Justice statistics on the number of rape kits that are collected and tested. As we've read over and over again, there is a backlog of rape kits. We have physical evidence against these perpetrators.
Move the bill.
Law enforcement should do a better job in making sure they're processed. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Portantino. Well, we have a motion that's been moved by Mr. Solario. It's been seconded by Mr. Hall. Okay. I see no witnesses in support, no witnesses in opposition. DOF, do you have a file?
The Department of Finance, Miriam Ingenito with the Department of Finance. The bill could result in a state-mandated local program by requiring local entities to provide a higher level of service. And additionally, while the bill doesn't require the Department of Justice to do anything with the information it receives from the local governments, we believe that it would be an expectation that DOJ perform certain duties, and at a minimum it would potentially incur costs associated with Public Records Act requests.
Thank you, DOF. It's our interpretation that we do disagree. It doesn't require the DOJ to do anything with information from the local level. We have a motion, again, made by Mr. Solario. It's been seconded by Mr. Hall. Mr. Portantino, this motion passes on an A roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have one measure, AB 743, that is a candidate for suspense. Do you wish to waive testimony? Thank you, Mr. Portantino. And we have AB 1436.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. AB 1436 is a bill to seek to have Internet access of higher education for open meeting purposes. It passed this committee in the Assembly unanimously last year. Unfortunately, I had to use the vehicle for something else, so we're here before you to represent AB 1436. Certainly, transparency and access to good government and open government is something we all share, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
I do agree with you, Mr. Portantino. Thank you for your testimony. Any witnesses in opposition? Seeing none. Any witnesses in support? Seeing none. DOF, do you have a file?
I do not have a file.
Thank you very much. We have a motion. It's been made by Mr. Solario. It's been seconded by our Vice Chairwoman. Bipartisan measure. This measure passes on an A roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you, Mr. Portantino. We have Mr. Fletcher in the audience. There you go. Mr. Fletcher, good morning. Mr. Fletcher, you have one measure before us today, which is AB 1088. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. In the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, George Washington said future generations' willingness to serve will be directly tied to how they perceive previous generations were treated. In California, one of the ways we do that is by our Veterans Home. We currently have about 1,500 veterans in 3 homes. That'll be expanding to about 3,000 veterans in 8 homes across California. AB 1088 creates a voluntary checkoff form where Californians can voluntarily elect. to give some of their money to help our veterans home, and I'd respectfully
Mr. Fletcher,
request
we
that I vote.
have a motion made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Solorio. Do we have any witnesses in support? I see none. Witness in opposition. Also see none. DOF, do you have a file?
The personal income taxes would be reduced by about $15,000, and costs to FTB and the controller would be minor.
Thank you very much. Again, to reiterate, a motion by Mr. Amiano, second by Mr. Solorio. This motion passes on an A roll call. Thank you very much, Mr. Fletcher. Have a good day. Ms. Hancock, please come on up. Senator Hancock, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Nice to see you here today. You have SB 205 before us. We have a due pass recommendation to add the urgency clause to make a technical amendment. I see that you do have witnesses. I'm going to ask the witnesses to be as succinct as possible. I'm sure that the members of this committee will be highly appreciative. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. SB 205 is a technical cleanup measure to clarify the state's authority to distribute federal tax credits for the qualified school construction bond.
Move the bill.
Thank you. I have witnesses in support.
Let me just say we have a motion by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Solorio. Witnesses in support.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Chris Reef on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Construction Jack O'Connell. I couldn't put it better than Senator Hancock did. We are a co-sponsor and strongly ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Next witness.
Diane Stanton, State Treasurer's Office. We are also co-sponsor and in strong support.
Thank you, Ms. Stanton. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman, members, Tom Duffy, Coalition for Radical School Housing, in support of this measure. It will create jobs in California.
Thank you very much.
Dave Walrath, representing Small School Districts Association, in support for flexibility and low-cost loans.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition. Also seeing none. DOF, do you have a file?
No file.
Okay. We have a motion made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Solorio. Your opening was very compelling, and I will use that as your conclusion. This motion passes on an A roll call. Thank you very much, Ms. Hancock. Ms. Huber. Ms. Huber, good morning. You have one measure before us today, that's AB 584. You also have one other measure that is on consent, dealing with the County of Amador and the cities of Jackson, Sutter Creek, and Amador City. Please proceed.
Thank you. AB 584 seeks to allow the County of Amador and the cities of Jackson, Sutter Creek, and Amador City to establish a neighborhood electric vehicle transportation plan.
Move the bill.
Thank you very much. The plan would be require local law enforcement sign-off as well as Caltrans sign-off, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Ms. Skinner. Seeing no witnesses in opposition or in support, DOF, do you have a file?
We expect minor costs to Caltrans.
Minor costs. Thank you very much. This motion passes on a roll call. Have a good day, Mr. Huber. Thank you very much. Mr. Berryhill. Tom Berryhill. Good morning, Mr. Berryhill.
Good morning.
Mr. Berryhill, you have one motion before us, which is AB 1254. We have a due pass as amended to remove Section 3. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. AB 1254 contains 3 district measures that aid in clarity and, as appropriately noted in the committee's analysis, has the potential to save the state money.
Move the bill.
We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Solorio. It has been seconded by Ms. Conway. Do you have any witnesses in opposition? I've seen none. Witnesses in support? Also seeing none. Witnesses in support? Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members. Mark Henley with the California Outdoor Heritage Alliance, also representing California Waterfowl. We are in strong support of the bill.
Thank you very much. Seeing any other witnesses, I want to make sure I capture everybody. Seeing none. DOF, do you have a file?
No file.
Thank you very much. Mr. Berryhill, we have a motion made. We're not done yet. We have a motion made as amended by Mr. Solorio, and it's been seconded by Ms. Conaway, our Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee. The motion passed on a roll call. Thank you. You may leave.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. De La Torre? Mr. Jones. We have Mr. Kevin Jeffries next, please, and then I will call up Mr. Jones. Sergeants, I will ask you to please call Mr. De La Torre, Ms. Saldaña, Mr. Ruskin, Ms. Hayashi, Ms. Galgiani, Mr. Blumenfeld, Ms. Salas, Mr. Ng, Ms. Ma. Now we have Mr. Jeffries here and Mr. Nava. Mr. Jeffries, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
You have before us today, if you let me get my bearings straight, one measure, AB 127, which is a candidate for suspense. I will ask you to be very succinct since we will bring up this measure a little later today, as quickly as possible. Please proceed.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. California Volunteers is currently a state agency established by executive order that manages programs and initiatives to increase the number of Californians involved with service and volunteering. They also work in cooperation with Health and Human Services, Emergency Management Agency, and nonprofits. Most notable in these tough budget times is that less than 2% of their budget comes from the general fund. In order to ensure that California Volunteers is able to bring outside dollars into the state and carry on their important work, I offer AB 127, which would codify California Volunteers in statute instead of allowing the next governor's office to eliminate the office completely.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jeffries. This motion are not, the motions are not accepted. This is a candidate for that's quite okay. This is a candidate for suspense. Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. You'll hear the fate of your measure in a few minutes. Thank you. Next one, I see Mr. De La Torre on the line. Mr. De La Torre, good morning. You have
AB 1225.
AB 1225 and AB 1589 committee
Yes.
bill that's a candidate for suspense. Would you like to waive that testimony and go straight to AB
Yes.
1225?
1225, please.
Please proceed, Mr. De La Torre.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members, I'd like to start off by accepting the proposed amendments agreed upon in the Assembly Health Committee. AB 1225 ensures that state and local preparations for public health emergencies are as thorough as possible in order to protect the public from infectious disease outbreaks, including the recent emergence of H1N1. Specifically, the bill requires the Department of Public Health to follow up their preparedness simulations to identify deficiencies and track the implementation of any solutions to that. I think it's a common sense bill. I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. De La Torre. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Torlakson. Any witnesses in support? Seeing none. Any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. Do you have a file?
I do not.
No file. I will take your opening as your concluding remarks. Mr. De La Torre, this motion passes on a B roll call. Thank you very much. Ms. Saldaña, good morning. Ms. Saldaña, you have one measure before us, which is AB 408, which is a due pass recommendation dealing with the California spiny lobster fishery. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We have lobsters in California. The lobster fishermen want to keep those lobsters here. They're willing to pay a fee to do so. I ask for your support.
Thank you very much. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Torlakson. It's been seconded by Mr. Mike Davis. Any witnesses in support? Seeing none. Any witnesses? Are you a witness in support? Please proceed.
Bob.
Briefly, Wade Crowfoot from the Environmental Defense Fund. We're a sponsor of the bill and ask for your support.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. DOF, do you have a file?
It would result in additional $62,000 of revenue for the purpose.
Thank you very much. That's a good thing. We have a motion by Mr. Torlakson. We have a second by Mr. Mike Davis. This motion passes on a B roll call. Thank you very much, Ms. Saldaña. Mr. Ruskunevich.
До свидания.
Yeah, yes. On AB 177. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. This bill addresses the problems associated with individuals and businesses who seek to improperly...
Move the bill. Second.
Mr. Ruskin, we have a motion made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Torlakson. I see that you have no witnesses in support nor in opposition. Do you have a file?
No, I do not.
Okay. Mr. Ruskin, this motion passes on an A roll call.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Ms. Hayashi. Ms. Hayashi, good morning. You have three measures before us today. Two are on the consent file. One is AB 498, which is a due pass as amended to add co-authors. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. This legislation is sponsored, excuse me, wrong bill. This bill allows former prisoners of war, ex-POWs, the option to order a veteran's license plate.
We have a motion made by Mr. Cotto. We have a second by Mr. Amiano. Any witnesses in support, please?
Casey Elliott on behalf of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Department of California in strong support.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. Do you have a file?
We estimate that the DMV estimates that the one-time programming costs would be $100,000, and finance believes this is absorbable.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a motion made by Mr. Joe Cotto. It is second by Mr. Tom Amiano. This motion passes on an A roll call. Thank you very much, Ms. Hayashi. Ms. Salas. Ms. Salas, good morning. You have AB 674 before us. Consent as amended to delete a few references. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair and members. This bill makes minor changes in the existing law that will add military and sexual traumatic brain injury to those lists of ailments that will allow veterans to receive alternative sentences to a mental health program run by a veterans organization. The bill was approved by the Assembly Committee on Public Safety.
Ms. Salas, if I can slowly interrupt you,
yes.
And this is an error on my part. This is a measure, and I actually read it, and I still didn't catch it nonetheless. So this measure, AB 674, is on consent.
Oh, okay,
with
thank
the
you.
amendments.
That's even better.
Yes. So, thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you
good
so
day.
much.
I
Bye-bye.
apologies for me for bringing you up here. I apologize.
That's all right.
Okay. It's okay. Mr. Dave Jones.
Mr. Chairman, members, AB 151, which is a candidate for suspense, we'd like to present briefly. This bill deals with the very dangerous health and safety conditions at the BOA headquarters at 450 North Street in Sacramento. It authorizes DGS to investigate, negotiate, sale to get the employees out of there to a more appropriate building and save taxpayers' money. I've talked to your staff. We've agreed to take and propose an amendment that would strike the words "and negotiate" from page 2, line 16 of the bill, so it just authorizes the investigation of sale, exchange, and lease, so that we allow this bill to get caught up with a study that's being done to look at all the options that are available. With that, we know it's going to go to suspense. We'd ask for a favorable vote at the time to take a suspense calendar. We have some witnesses.
Okay, Mr. Jones, thank you. Witnesses in support.
Mr. Chair, Ray Hersig, Executive Director of the Board. We are a sponsor of the bill and support it. We request your support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Liz Hauser, Deputy Director of Admin for BOE, available for questions. We appreciate your support.
Thank you.
My name is Bobby Smith. I represent SEIU Local 1000 and the BOE employees that have taken the time off today to show that this bill is important to them.
Who are they? Can you raise your hand so we can see them? Stand. Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you very much for taking the time to come today.
We have been waiting for a couple years to move forward with getting the employees out of the building because of the health and safety issues with this building, and we respectfully ask for your support on this bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
Suzanne Sutton with California Taxpayers Association in support.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you for the witnesses. We will decide that in very shortly. Mr. Jones, I'm going to please ask you to stay and present a measure by Ms. Hayashi.
Very good. Happy to do that right now, sir.
Okay, that is AB 658. I'm sure you will do a fine job.
Mr. Chairman, members, presenting AB 658 by Ms. Hayashi, this bill creates the California Police Activities Lead Fund checkoff to the personal income tax form upon the removal of another voluntary contribution fund. We ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. We have a motion made by Mr. Torlakson. It's been seconded by Mr. Joe Cotto. This motion passes on a roll call.
If I may close on the other bill, that bill is jointly authored by Senator George Runner and enjoys strong bipartisan support. We commend it to you when you vote on your expense calendar.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you much, Mr. Jones. Duly noted. Thank you. Do we see Ms. Galgiani? We do not see Ms. Galgiani, but we see Mr. Bob Blumenfield.
Mike Ing is there, too.
Suspense. Mr. Blumenfield, thank you. I'm going to ask you to be very succinct, you and your witnesses, on this measure. It's on suspense.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members. First, I want to mention I've submitted author's amendments, which are important to realize because what they do is they remove the general fund completely from this bill. So the author amendments make it so that there will be no general fund impact whatsoever by this bill.
Move the bill.
Well,
go ahead.
It's been moved. I'll give you the quick and dirty. There is a really important program that was in the budget last year which allowed the most vulnerable citizens, seniors and disabled, to postpone their property tax if they couldn't make it so that they wouldn't be foreclosed on and kicked out of their homes. In the budget process, unfortunately, we got rid of that program even though it paid for itself. The money that came in from when they passed away or when they sold their house was more than enough to cover the cost of the property tax postponement. So what I'm trying to do is reinstate that program in such a way that it won't impact the general fund. And working with the state controller, we found a way to do that by setting up a special revolving fund loan program that will allow the counties to invest because they're the ones who are impacted by this property tax postponement, and the counties will talk about it. They're fully supportive and do so in a way that will help the most vulnerable citizens, folks who called my office threatening suicide because they couldn't. I mean, literally, this was the kind of desperate pleas I got in my office about folks who were worried about their homes being closed upon. And it's really a dire situation, and I ask for your help with this bill to help the most vulnerable people in our state. Thank you.
Witnesses being very succinct, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Linda Ling-Bloom with the State Controller's Office. I would just like to take a quick minute to point out something that's not in the analysis. Although the program has been suspended and we have stopped making loans, there is the fact that there's still $109 million in accounts receivables. These are loans that have already been paid out that we need to collect on. And if we lose these homes to a foreclosure or short sale, we will not see a dime of that money come back. So it's important that we reinstate this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Jean Hurst on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. As Mr. Blumenfield mentioned, we've been working closely with his office on this program and are in full support of its reinstatement. Do want to point out that the analysis mentions loss to the general fund associated with the fines and penalties associated with delinquent taxes on these properties. We don't believe that's the case. Most counties participate in teeter programs. Schools get 100% of their property taxes up front, and counties assume the risk for fines and penalties. Thanks very much.
Go ahead, next witness.
Joanna Voris with the Urban Counties Caucus, also in support.
Thank you. Next witness. No, okay, gotcha. Any other witnesses, sir?
AARP in support of this bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Blumenfeld, we'll revisit this issue on the next round. Ms. Harkey had a question? Go ahead, have a question, Ms. Harkey.
I do, and I think that Mr. Blumenfeld actually addressed it with me, but I just want to say to the persons present that my concern when this came through on rev and tax was very much that there wouldn't be a way for lenders, local lenders, to discern as to what was on this, what qualified or what was on this plan versus what was not, and it would cause create confusion for them trying to administer, and by strictly through administrative, cause things to go into default that really should not, because if a person has impounds for taxes and insurance and their mortgage, if they're sending in a partial payment for only part of it, I wanted to be sure that the lender knew what the situation was. Now, Mr. Blumenfeld has told me that they are continuing to work with the banks to be sure there's some kind of reporting so that they know not to put the have the loan go into foreclosure, and also so that they have some accounting, some letter from somebody letting them know that this is the situation and they can set it aside. So you'll continue working on it?
Absolutely. No, it's a very good question that you raised in Revenue Tax. We're working with the Controller's Office and the lenders to set up a system where the Controller would notify, would send a letter to the folks on the property tax postponement, and they could use that letter to give to their lender, and that would be the notification. And we're working closely with the lenders to come up with a system. But I appreciate you raising the issue, and we're working hard to address it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Blumenfeld.
Thank you.
This, Mr. Ring. Mr. Ring, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members.
You have one measure before us today, which is AB 953, which is a due pass as amended. You have several on consent, and you have one that's a candidate for suspense. Would you like to present AB 953?
Yes, thank you. And I'll try to keep my presentation very brief. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. As we know, during these times of difficulty with rainy season, traffic on the road, we have the issues of collisions, unfortunately. This bill seeks to make sure that the injured parties have reparation, and that the responsible parties own up to the responsibility. 953 clarifies current law by allowing agents...
Mr. Ring, you have a motion made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Solorio.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see you have witnesses in support.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Berg.
Cliff Berg with California Association of Collectors. We are the sponsors, and in support of the bill, urge your aye vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berg. Next witness.
Dennis Clear from DMV to answer any technical questions.
Thank you very much. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Solori. I should say Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Torlakson. We have one question by Mr. Calderon.
And I guess it's a clarification of the language. From what my reading of the language, in order for the information to be released to the bill collector must be an agent for the insurance company.
Yes, Mr. Calderon.
All right. An agent consistent with all agency law.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. We have a motion been made as well as a second. This motion passes on a roll call.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Chair.
much, Mr. Ring.
AB 1391.
Yeah, the amendments were taken as amended. Yeah.
That's not on. Oh, I see. It's a suspense candidate. Yeah. Okay. 1391.
Mr. Ring, you have another measure?
Yes, the item on suspense, AB 1391. Permission to make a very brief presentation on that?
Yes, I just want to be consistent with everybody else, just
very brief,
be succinct as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. AB 1391 simply allows consumers to be protected and acupuncturists to be regulated by extending the sunset on the California Acupuncture Board. I have witnesses here in support from the board, as well as the executive officer, in case there should be questions. Respectfully request an aye vote.
Sandy Carey, representing the Council of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine Associations. We're the sponsor of the bill, in strong support, and ask for your aye vote.
Janelle Wedge, Executive Officer of the Acupuncture Board, and I respectfully request your support of this bill.
Thank you very much.
Suspense.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Ms. Galgiani. I'm going to be consistent, Ms. Galgiani, like I am with everyone else. This is a candidate for suspense. I am asked to be very succinct.
Thank you. I have one point that I would like to make, and that is that this bill does not call for the addition of any additional staff. Rather, this bill transfers the existing staff from the High-Speed Rail Authority to the new department we are proposing to create and allows for any new state employees who will be funded through bond money or federal stimulus money to be under the employ of this new department as well. And I have Steve Schneid with me from the authority if anyone has any questions.
None here.
Mr. Chairman and members, the authority doesn't have a position on the bill. We have monitored it. To the extent that there are any costs, they'd be negligible. The day-to-day operations would not change at the authority. We would absorb any negligible costs.
Okay, thank you. Echoed her comments. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Galgiani.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Rambula. Good morning, Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
I want to be consistent with everybody. This is a suspense candidate, AB 976. I'll ask you to please be succinct.
This is Assembly Bill 537 you refer to, or?
I have AB 976.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The purpose of this bill is to provide additional information to students and parents when we are talking about the selection of an alternative education option, specifically independent study. This bill will require districts to provide students and parents with a list of all alternative educational options that are available and the requirements that the student must fulfill before returning back to a regular high school. I understand the committee had to assume a worst-case scenario, but I would like to share with the committee that the Commission on State Mandates indicated that no district had claimed reimbursement for a similar disclosure that is required by current law, and there was a recent amendment as late as 2004 to the statute. So, in essence, Mr. Chair and the members, we have in statute already a similar provision, and there have been no claims filed with the Commission on State Mandates. So I would respectfully ask for an aye vote, and I would also, just in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, point out that the enabling statute says, and I quote, the governing board of a school district or county office of education may offer independent study, meaning it's permissive, so I don't believe there would be any liability from the Commission on State Mandates on this matter. With that, I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rambola, have a good day. Mr. Cotto, would you like to come on down? Mr. Joe Cotto, would you like to come down and present? Okay. Good morning, Mr. Cotto.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. This bill provides the AB 1054 provides the possibility of added flexibility to hard-pressed consumers in tough economic times by encouraging insurers to make credit card insurance premium payments available to consumers. And I would respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cotto.
Move the bill.
We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Solorio. It's been seconded, Mr. Amiano. You have a witness present, Mr. McKaylee.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Chris McKaylee on behalf of Mercury Insurance, the sponsor of the bill, and urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, we have a motion by Mr. Solorio. It's been seconded by Mr. Amiano. Mr. Cotto, this measure passes on an A roll call.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mr. Solorio? Mr. Solorio, you have 4 measures, 3 that are on the suspense file, and 1 that's just a due pass recommendation, that AB 317, dealing with H1N1. Would you like to proceed?
AB 317 asks for your support. Given the swine flu epidemic, we need to do something to keep our kids healthy, as well as help struggling schools, given the many absences associated with swine flu. Ask for your vote.
Okay. We have a motion that's been made by Ms. Connie Conway, Vice Chair of the committee. It's been seconded by Mr. Joe Cotto. Witnesses in support?
Dennis Myers with the California Association of School Business Officials in strong support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Dave Walrath, Small School Districts Association in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. A witness in opposition? Also seeing none. Do you have a file? No file. Okay. This motion passes on an A roll call.
Thank you. 2 suspense items, AB 41 and AB 1239. I will waive presentation. I do want to make a brief presentation regarding AB 1590.
Please proceed.
Members, as you might know, last summer we authorized the state to consider selling the Orange County Fairgrounds. We have a process that's been flawed. We have now a deal on the table that would provide the state 25 cents on the dollar. The offer is about $56 million. The governor's own performance review estimated the value at $230 million. Given it's not a good financial deal for the state and many other process flaws, we're asking that we repeal the sale and that we find another way to maximize the value of the property.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solorio. Mr. Van Tran?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, very briefly, I think my colleague spoke on all the pertinent points, but we have bipartisan support on this bill. As you see in the report, the highest bid was substantially lower than expected, lower than even the low bid or the low estimates from the state government. So we're asking for a suspension of the sale based on the language of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you much, Mr. Van Tran. You can sit where you're at right now.
Thank you. Katrina Foley on behalf of the Costa Mesa City Council, where the fairgrounds is located, and we respectfully request your aye vote on this. The City Council has consistently opposed the sale of the fairgrounds, and the site generates more than $185 million in revenue. It's an engine of economic revenue for our community, and this sale will be a jobs killer and a business buster. It also is under market. The $56 million is highly under market for that site. The buildings on the facility are worth more than the $56 million bid.
Thank you. Next witness.
Jeff Teller on behalf of the Orange County Market.
Would you hit your button right there?
Sorry about that. Okay. Jeff Teller on behalf of the Orange County Marketplace. My company represents 1,610 small businesses that operate on the property every weekend. It would be catastrophic to see this property sold, as we'd put thousands and thousands of people potentially out of work and kill the American dream of small business.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Casey Elliott with Townsend Public Affairs. Casey Elliott with Townsend Public Affairs on behalf of the cities of Santa Ana, Brea, and San Juan Capistrano, as well as the Coast Community College District, in strong support of this measure.
Thank you. Next witness. Next witness.
Crystal Jack on behalf of Western Fairs Association in support of the bill.
Thank you. Next witness. Those in opposition.
Laura Zuniga with the State and Consumer Services Agency in opposition to the bill. This bill repeals the provision of the existing budget, and the state is currently involved in the sale process and is still highly motivated to sell the property. The Department of General Services is currently reviewing bids and doing their due diligence to determine and analyze what is most beneficial to the state. So we would oppose this bill at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. We had a question. Was it Ms. Harkey? Ms. Harkey.
I just want to speak in strong support of my colleagues for this bill. We got taken on this. We got told one thing and another thing happened, and I'm the first to admit it. This fairground is right in the middle of a huge city of Costa Mesa, and in the county of Orange, and there was lack of transparency as to what was happening with it. And we were told that it was going to remain a fairgrounds, and I had assumed that the city was on board with that, and as well as the county was on board with that, and that was the transaction that we were being asked to approve. As it turns out, that's not the case. It's gone to bid way below the value of this precious prime real estate, if indeed the state has to sell it. But if it was originally intended to be as a fairgrounds, and it would still have to go through local zoning and approval to be changed to anything else. So with the city so opposed, with the county opposed, and all the players opposed to this, it just really seems like we got sold a bill of goods that really was not what was going on. So, you know, I apologize for all of this inconvenience, but I do hope we have support on this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solorio. I will commend you for your tenacious advocacy for the Orange County Fairgrounds. You are to be recognized.
Thank you. And we look forward to working with you and the rest of the legislators in moving this issue forward to make sure we maximize the sale of the property, if there is a sale.
Okay, I think we have a question or commentary. Senator Nielsen.
Assemblymember Solorio or Assemblymember Tran, I have a little bit of a reservation here about a historic precedent that may be a part of this. I'd ask you or any witnesses to comment. These agricultural districts are very precious and long held and very traditional throughout the state of California. Were this to proceed, at the least, I'd like to have some language included that acknowledges this is not to be construed as a precedent. That would be encouraging the divestment of other fairs around the state of California. Have there been other examples or other instances where such district fairs have been divested like this?
There's been other cases where the property is no longer used as a permanent area by a particular fair board, and then they have to year to year struggle to find different facilities, and it's been a loss of agricultural heritage and the connection between farms and agriculture to the people. So that is one of the big concerns that many Orange County citizens have, which is we might lose a permanent place to keep learning about agriculture.
And I'm also sensitive to all the small businesses that are now transacting business there on the property. Is there any way that their interests can be accommodated?
Again, right now there's a bid on the table. The governor's reviewing it. We think it's not a good price. We think they should really go back to the drawing table and work collaboratively with the locals, as typically is DGS's best practices. They'll reach out to the locals to figure out what the zoning is, what might be an appropriate use. They did not do that in this case. The state knows how to do a better job of maximizing the sale of the property. This process is flawed, and we're asking that it be repealed as a sale.
Yeah, okay. Again, I just would reiterate my concern about precedent. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another witness on the board that just wants to state their name and position.
Stephanie Burry with SAU Local 1000 in support of the measure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Solorio.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Ma. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr.
I just had, maybe I just make a statement while
Mr. Solorio.
I mean, yeah, I was going to ask a question of General Services that, whether, when you go to auction or bid, you don't have to accept the bid. And so my understanding is the governor wants to accept this bid even though it's at fire sale prices. And I'm just curious why the governor supports selling this prime property for half of its value, which then can be developed significantly. And I mean, it doesn't sound right to me. And I was just curious why the governor would accept, a fire sale price.
That'd be DOF. Would you like to answer that question?
The state hasn't accepted the bid. The Department of General Services is doing its due diligence right now and is reviewing the bid and is reviewing the contract itself. So we haven't actually accepted the bid yet. That is correct.
So
the state still has the possibility of.
So you're actually, but you're considering it, or you wouldn't be doing the due diligence, right?
Correct, because we had put it out to auction, and this was the highest bid. So we are doing the due diligence on this round.
It's not clear on his face. I mean, I don't mean to. I mean, you know, when you assume $98 million, of course that's optimistic. But when you get something like 58, you're going to actually consider that, do the diligence, and consider that instead of rejecting it outright.
We are going to follow through on our process. The original estimate of, excuse me, 90 to 180 million was an estimate, but it wasn't based on an appraisal. It was just based on a survey of the market at the time. We don't know what it was worth. So
you mean the governor proposed selling the property to balance our budget and estimated the value to be 98 when there wasn't even an appraisal done on the property?
Yeah, they've done no appraisal, and that's another flaw in the process. We don't know what it's worth.
Okay, I don't want to go on about it. It's just bizarre.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the $96 million was booked in 2011-12 as well, so this is not something that was counted in the current year budget or in the budget that we are.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next one. Thank you. Ms. Ma. Ms. Ma, you have two measures before us today. One is on consent, it's AB 223. You have a due pass recommendation, AB 384.
Okay, so I will pass.
Due
Comments on
pass
that?
384 is a bill that you'll testify on today,
Okay.
right now.
Good afternoon, almost. Mr. Chair and members, AB 384 ensures fair and equitable assessment of certified aircraft. Specifically, this bill extends the sunset date and provisions of the centralized fleet calculation program. AB 384 ensures that administrative efficiencies for both the airlines and the counties will continue. With me to testify in support is Greg Cook, representing the California Assessors Association.
Mr. Chair and members, Greg Cook, representing the California Assessors Association. The county assessors have realized over $3.5 million each year in savings of costs as a result of the success of the program. We urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Thank you, Chair and members. Kate Bell on behalf of American Airlines. We're also in strong support of this measure and thank the author and sponsors for reintroducing it again this year. Ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair and members, Jean Hurst on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. We urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witnesses in support.
Kathy Van Austin Rosenkindle on behalf of United Airlines in support of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Joe Ackler on behalf of Alaska Airlines, and we'd like to thank Mama for all our help and for the assessors themselves for working with the industry. We support the bill also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. Do you have to have a file?
We believe it would have no state general fund impact because it extends an existing program, and we believe that the uniform assessment mechanism is extremely helpful to both the locals and the state.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion? We have a motion by Mr. Torlakson. We have a second by Mr. Bradford. This measure passes, Ms. Ma, on an A roll call.
Okay. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Mr. Amiano. Bring him over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm going to waive three of the bills, and I'd like to present on two, if I may. The first one is AB 312, and this is a bill that would establish an independent oversight body for the Bay Area Rapid Transit Police. I want to thank the chair and his staff for working with me to find the appropriate amendments to remove the cost, and I am happy to take these amendments. I also will be working closely with Mr. Swanson, who has a bill with a similar purview. We have pledged to work together to present on the floor a compromise. And I have no witnesses today.
Okay, Mr. Amina, why don't we go and focus on one measure, which is AB 633. The other measures that you reference are candidates for suspense. Let's go to AB 633.
All right, I'll just waive.
Okay.
Waive presentation.
Okay, but you waive
pass.
presentations on the other ones, but you'll make presentation on AB 633, which is a due pass recommendation.
Okay.
Do you have that with you right now?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'll give you a few minutes to look for AB 633.
Okay. Mr. Chair and members, I present to you AB 633, a measure to amend the Sexual Abuse and Detention Elimination Act. My bill would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the current list of factors that should be considered when classifying and housing prisoners. According to the analysis, the bill would cost only minimal cost pressures to the state. It is likely that these costs would be offset because this bill would prevent future litigation. I have two witnesses.
Okay, witnesses in support.
Good afternoon, Mario Guerrero with Equality California. We are the sponsor, and we urge your support. LGBT inmates are 15 times more likely to be sexually assaulted by another inmate than the general population, and it has been stated there's minimal administrative costs, and this would be offset by decreased litigation and savings from medical costs. We urge your support.
Next witness, go ahead, Mr. Hernandez.
Ignacio Hernandez on behalf of the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice in support of the bill.
Okay, we have a motion that has been made by Mr. Bradford. It's been seconded by Ms. Skinner. Any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Do you have a file?
CDCR indicates that costs associated with this bill would be minor and absorbable within existing resources.
Okay, let's call a Republican roll call.
Conway? No. Conway, no. Harkey? Harkey, aye. Miller? Nielsen? No. Nielsen, no. Strickland? Strickland, aye.
Mr. Amiano, congratulations. AB 633 does pass. Let's rewind a little bit, and let's go back to a candidate that's on suspense, which is AB 312. You referenced that. I know we have opposition here today. I don't know if we have those in support also too, but if we have those who are in support of this measure, please come up. Those in, this is in support. Okay.
Steve Wallach on behalf of the City of Berkeley and the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. We are in support of this bill and are also working on the other bill as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none, those in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, members, Randy Perry on behalf of the California Association of Highway Patrol and PORAC. We're adamantly opposed to this bill. We don't think there's a need for it. I haven't seen any amendments to take out the mandate, the state mandate that was pointed out by the analysis. And we are in full support of the Swanson bill that allows a local agreement that has been made at no cost to the state.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perry. Next witness in opposition.
Good morning. My name is Jim Frayne, representing the Deputy Sheriff's Association of Orange County, Sacramento, the State Coalition of Probation Organizations. We're unfortunately in opposition to this bill. We believe it's a local issue. It usurps the power of the sheriff. It's unnecessary, and if this legislation passes, it could be down the line applied across the state. One size doesn't fit all. Yuba County wouldn't work for Los Angeles. We respectfully oppose the bill. Thank you.
Lobbyist. I think it's.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Yes. In closing, I'd like to say that we have worked very, very closely with the community, the members of the BART board. My staff attended hours and hours of community meetings. The community wants independent oversight. That means citizen oversight. That's what this bill delivers. It is not a local issue. Police misconduct is a state and national issue. BART itself is an interagency between 6 counties. This is something that was very, very tragic in its inception with the murder of Oscar Grant. The city itself and the region took this issue to heart. This is a solution and will not present any other problems. The other thing is we're working on the training of BART police themselves because even with the best independent oversight, if the officers are not trained, these incidences will reoccur, and those conclusions were reached by 2 independent studies. So I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armiano. We're done. Mr. Armiano?
Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
All right, thank you. I have one other I'd like to present, if I may.
That would be AB 535 or?
1199.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. I present to you Assembly Bill 1199, a measure similar to AB 1176, which was rather colorfully and cavalierly vetoed by the governor. I reject the veto and the encrypted offer. AB 1199 expands the port.
Mr. Amiano, is this the infamous letter that you're referring to?
Yes, the acrostic letter, yes. AB 1199 expands the Port of San Francisco's infrastructure financing powers by enabling capture of growth in property taxes from port revitalization. Specifically, AB 1199 has been drafted to prohibit the formation of a Pier 70 IFD for 3 years from the time this bill would become law, thus deferring any backfill until that time, and established in the beginning of the 21st year after the establishment in IFD any tax increment amounts that exceed the ERAF, and so they would be paid back. We worked very assiduously with the Senate Appropriations to make this bill presentable. I do have a witness from the port, Mr. Brad Benson.
Thank you.
Brad Benson, representing the Port of San Francisco, in support of the bill. Pier 70 is a former military base site with a National Register eligible historic district. It could be a real state asset on the San Francisco waterfront. We really appreciate your consideration of this bill.
Thank you very much. Mr. Amiano, if you notice on page 3 of the analysis, number 4, we have here in the second sentence the acrostic veto message with regards to the governor. The acrostic, I can't take credit for that. My vernacular is not as sophisticated and complex. This goes to Mr. Brad Williams, which denotes or defines when you actually spell out a paragraph and you spell out a word. And it's what was done to you, I don't know if by chance or it was calculating, but nonetheless, I thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Strickland and Ms. Skinner have waived presentation. Mr. Anderson, on behalf of Mr. Joel Anderson, I also waive presentation. So give us a couple minutes and we will start with our suspense. Ms. Fuller, if you could be so kind to come up. Ms. Fuller, we have AB 656, which is Mr. Tarico's measure. Mr. Tarico has waived presentation for this measure. This is a candidate for suspense. I know that you have a large crowd that's come I'm making an assumption, to oppose this measure from your neck of the woods in Kern County. I want to give them the respect and recognition they deserve, as well as you do as a representative. Mr. Tarico, again, I want to underscore, has been kind enough to waive his presentation. I would ask you to be succinct, and your witnesses also too, with regards to the remarks to this measure. So please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. We are here to testify in opposition to AB 656 Tarico. We thank you for the courtesy extended to us today. I will basically focus on one argument that for Kern County, which produces 70% of the oil in California, this will cripple our economy, killing approximately 10,000 jobs in an area that already has 30% unemployment across the majority of the county. This is the new me for us. We just can't take this. And it's also in counties such as Santa Barbara, LA County, just to mention a few. This will cut oil production for them as well, and jobs. The estimate of reduced oil production by the legislative analyst Bill Ham is 50 to 80,000 barrels a day. And we would also like to say that we think I personally think this bill represents weak fiscal policy, because it's using a volatile revenue stream to supplement an increasing expenditure base, and will come back to us in the general fund shortly, I'm afraid. The shirt I have with me today, I get up and look at it every day. Last week when we testified, there were 250 people besides the 50 that are with me today wearing this shirt, and there are 10,000 across my county that will not have jobs, that will be in my unemployment line. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. You have witnesses also. Please, I would ask you to please be very succinct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Alan Crowder, representing the Kern County Board of Supervisors. The board is opposed to AB 656. When the thousands of people who lose their jobs as production is cut, and the places where they shop, those workers lose their job, these people will be coming to the county welfare office for help. We won't have jobs to refer them to because there are already too many people out of work. Our county hospital is overwhelmed with the uninsured and Medicaid populations. So this is going to take tax revenues away from us to help them, and it's going to add to our caseloads.
Thank you. Next witness.
My name is Derek Jones with Vern Jones Oil and Gas, located here in the Sacramento area. We are primarily in the natural gas business and have 11 employees, but rely heavily on multiple service and supply companies throughout the state. AB 656 will have a disproportional negative impact on our...
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
It was my understanding it was two individuals who were going to speak. So those are, you're the second one? Please proceed then.
Okay. AB 656 will have a negative impact on small oil and gas companies and affect our ability to raise capital and reinvest in our business. Oil and gas operators consistently need to be reinvesting, retrofitting existing wells, replacing depleted reserves will be economically unviable. A 12% severance tax will quickly translate into significant declines in our state production and greater reliance on foreign sources of supply. This tax will not only impact Kern County, but also other areas of the state, such as the Sacramento Valley. These are the reasons that we oppose the bill.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Fuller. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on the opposition to AB 656. Mr. Tarico. Again, Mr. Tarico did waive presentation, so I want to underscore that. We're going to go. No. Everyone who's come up from Kern County has been represented by Ms. Fuller. I want you to know that. I thank you very much for taking the time. We're going to go to our suspense file. We got to get to the business of order today. Let's do consent file. Yes, Mr. Quinpoint.
The quick point, Mr. Chairman, is that these individuals who are walking out here right now are the real faces and the consequences of actions by this legislature. I am a great devotee and advocate for higher education. And in this budget the governor submitted, higher education has actually been given an increase. This is a very bad way to go about funding higher education. The other bad idea is the budget proposal by the administration to take monies from the prisons and redirect them to higher ed. These are two bad ideas, but what's instructive here today, I would hope to the legislature, the faces of the people who would be put out of work, not be able to provide for their families pursuant to something that we do in terms of taxes.
Yes, Ms. Harkey.
Mr. Chair, may I just ask if the people from other counties could raise their hand?
Sure,
They have
absolutely.
asked me that they're not from Kern County.
Okay,
so-
without a doubt.
And this is from all around the state.
Oh, it seems like the vast majority are not from Kern County. I shouldn't have allowed you to speak, Ms. Fuller.
That's the way it goes.
Okay. You snuck one in there. Thank you, Ms. Fuller. And thank you very much for all taking the time to come up here.
I'd like to make a comment before you go away. I think there's a big point that's being missing here, that this severance tax is a gross receipts tax, and it actually devalues the oil reserves. And that means that property taxes the oil companies pay on the reserves will be less, and that hurts local revenues. So we're trying to feed the schools, but we're actually decreasing the property tax. It's not going to work. And we're taking jobs out of a community and a state that's already almost 13% unemployment, and that community at 30%. I think it's unconscionable that this would even be suggested, and the fact that it will not help improve or will not help the UCs or their universities in the end result because of the property tax devaluation, I think is something that's being ignored. So we all want to help the schools, but we don't, there's no sense for us to start carnaging our own on this. We have a lot of problems in this state, a lot of things we need to work on, and we've got a huge hole. We're fundamentally bankrupt, and if we're going to start carnaging each other just so that we get a little piece of the pie, that's very uncivilized. So I know the schools need funding. I'm well aware of it, and I'm strong university supporter, strong school supporter. But these people need to work, and the net result is going to be a net loss to this state in the unemployment, in the benefits, and in the property tax revenues. So this is a bad fix at a very bad time, and it doesn't show goodwill within the state of California from one segment to another of our society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Harkey. Okay, we're going to start with the consent file before I go to the final order of business, which is our suspense file. We have AB 25, AB 113, AB 1097, AB 1204, 1224, 1229, 1414, 1431, 1433, 1502, and 1524. We have 674 and 1155, which have amendments. I'd like to entertain a motion.
Move the consent
We have a
calendar.
motion made by Mr. Solorio. It's been seconded by Mr. Bradford. The consent file has passed. Let's move on to the January 2010 Assembly Appropriations suspense file. We have 43 bills before us, 28 authors. We have 25 measures that are recommended do pass as amended. In total value scored, we have $1.15 billion proposed in these measures. We have cut it down dramatically, and that is an understatement to say the least, to less than roughly a couple $100,000 representative of all these measures in the aggregate. So we will start. Members, we will begin with the Assembly Appropriations Committee suspense file. We will begin with AB 312, Mr. Tom Amiano. Recommendation do pass as amended to add a local mandate disclaimer, as BART has the authority to recover all costs. Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion by Mr. Amiano? Do we have a second? Let's move. We'll hold right now. Let's move. And second measure, AB 535, Mr. Tom Amiano. We have hold in committee. That's none. AB 963, Mr. Tom Amiano, establishes a public benefits stakeholder group. Recommendation do pass as amended to delete all general fund costs and delete cost pressures. We have a motion made by Mr. Torlakson. It's been seconded by Mr. Joe Cotto. Those motions, first and second, will substitute for all subsequent bills. This measure passes on a B roll call. AB 1199 by Mr. Tom Amiano reverses the infrastructure financing district in San Francisco. Do pass as recommended. B roll call. AB 1518, Mr. Joel Anderson reporting on inactive and obsolete state board and commissions. Do pass with amendments limiting the scope of the report and the costs. A roll call. AB 537, Mr. Juan Arambula, subject allowing food stamps, electronic benefits access at farmers markets. Do pass with clarifying amendments to reduce the cost to less than $50,000. B roll call. AB 976, Mr. Juan Arambula, parent notification regarding alternative education programs, hold in committee. AB 12, Mr. Jim Bell, Madam Speaker, subject expanding foster care kin gap and adoptions assistance to age 21. Do pass with amendments delaying implementation and making other technical and conforming changes per the federal regulations. B roll call. AB 1178, Mr. Marty Block, corporate tax loopholes and tax sales exemptions for college texts and supplies. Do pass with technical amendments. B roll call. AB 1223, Mr. Marty Block, Commission on Teacher Credentialing, work group to develop program standards for linked learning. Do pass with an amendment authorizing the CTC to convene a work group. B roll call. AB 1224, subject parolee driver's license, hold in committee. AB 1029, Mr. Blumenfeld reinstates property tax postponement program, hold in committee. AB 68, Ms. Julia Brownlee, subject single-use grocery bags, hold in committee. AB 220, Ms. Julia Brownlee, subject K through 12, school facility program, do pass. A roll call. AB 821, Ms. Julia Brownlee, subject requires school districts to use environmentally preferable cleaning products, hold in committee. AB 87, Mr. Mike Davis, subject single-use grocery bags, hold in committee. AB 1589, Mr. Hector De La Torre, a committee bill, whistleblower protection and reporting for regional centers, hold in committee. AB 1391, Mr. Mike Egan, subject acupuncture board, sunset, do pass as recommended. B roll call. AB 35, Mr. Warren Fortani, subject education workforce development, do pass as recommended. B roll call. AB 505, Mr. Warren Fortani, subject sexual offender housing, hold in committee. AB 549, Mr. Fortani, adding a clinical laboratory personal classification, do pass as amended to link provisions to a current law fee schedule. A roll call. AB 551, Mr. Warren Fortani, reducing community colleges' reliance on property tax revenues, do pass with amendments replacing the contents of the bill with an LAO analysis of the property tax issue. Republicans off, waiting for amendments. AB 1375, Ms. Galgiani establishes a Department of High-Speed Trains, do pass as recommended. B roll call. AB 127, subject Mr. Jeffries, codifying the Office of California Volunteers, do pass as recommended. A roll call. AB 151, Mr. Jones, investigating the sale of the Board of Equalization headquarters building, do pass with amendments authorizing DGS to investigate potential terms of sale. Republicans off. AB 1533, Mr. Ted Lieu, subject MOU spot bill for bargaining unit number 16, do pass. Republicans off. AB 984, Mr. Pedro Nava, mandating witness reporting, do pass recommendation. A, roll call. AB 978, Mr. Victor Manuel Perez, online master application process for state business permits to pass with amendments limiting the application system to the Department of Consumer Affairs. Do pass, Republicans off. AB 1378, Mr. Victor Manuel Perez, subject veterans job training programs. Do pass recommendation. A, roll call. AB 1491, Mr. Victor Manuel Perez, corporate board registry. Hold in committee. AB 1556, committee bill, Mr. Victor Manuel Perez, subject certification for certain financial intermediaries. Hold in committee. They make a difference anyways. AB 743, Mr. Anthony Portantino, requirements for placement of siblings in foster care. Do pass with amendments, removing new language concerning the higher standard for sibling placements and visitation, which will reduce costs to a minor amount. Pass, Republicans off. AB 1231, Mr. Anthony Portantino, required reappointment rights for part-time adult education teachers to be collectively bargained. Hold in committee. AB 977, Ms. Nancy Skinner, with regards to immunization protocols. Do pass as amended to delete in consultation with a physician and surgeon. A, roll call. AB with Ms. Harkey not voting. AB 1504, forest resources carbon sequestration. Do pass. B, roll call. AB 41, Mr. Jose Solorio, Community Development Investments reporting. Do pass as amended to eliminate special fund costs and reduce workload. B, roll call. AB 1239, Mr. Jose Solorio, with regards to prison education programs. Do pass as amended to substitute program triage reporting language for the budgeting goals contained in the bill. B, roll call. AB 1590, Mr. Jose Solorio, Orange County Fairground Sale. Do pass with amendments. Declaring legislative intent for any sale, lease, or exchange of state property. DGS should seek to maximize revenue to the state. Republican roll call.
Conway? Aye. Conway, aye. Harkey? Harkey, aye. Harkey, aye. Miller? Nielsen? Aye. Nielsen, aye. Strickland?
Get him off. Yeah.
Bill.
Bill passes. AB 973, Ms. Audra Strickland, temporary custody for drug-exposed newborns. Do pass with amendments to removing report requirements to eliminate costs. A, roll call. AB 391, Mr. Tom Torlickson, requires Superintendent of Public Instruction to contract for an independent evaluation of standardized testing and reporting, the STAR program. Do pass as amended to ensure it requires federal funding. Measure passes, Republicans off. AB 424, Ms. Norma Torres, subject 911 System Public Education Campaign. Do pass recommendation. B, roll call. AB 656, Mr. Alberto Torrico, subject oil severance tax to fund higher education. Do pass with amendments striking the contents of the bill and instead requiring the Board of Equalization to report by November 1st each year on the amount of revenue that would be raised with a 12.5% oil severance tax and the amounts that would be distributed to higher education, with 50% going to Cal State University, 25% to UC, and 25% to the community colleges. Measure passes. B, roll call. Members, this concludes our business for today. We have one more measure before us that's left. I'd ask the members not to leave yet. We just have one measure left. We have a couple more minutes. Sergeants, if you could please come up, one individual. Either one, you can choose among yourselves.
She said, okay.
What's the bill number? 549.
Members, this concludes the business for today. This meeting is adjourned.